Hi, my name is Francesca Pileggi. I'm the executive director of Aevidum, and I'm really excited to be able to tell you about our mental health and suicide prevention curriculum for middle school and high school students. This curriculum has been in place for the past few years. It's available for immediate free download on the Aevidum website. And I'd really just like to help familiarize you with the program, give you some best tips and practices for trying to implement it at your school, and just kind of walk you through the platform on our website where the program is hosted so you can easily use it. So, this curriculum is made up of 11 different lessons, and we've sort of sorted these 11 lessons into 5 modules. However, you do not have to use them in the order that they are currently. You don't have to use the modules as they're structured. At the end of this presentation, I will show you different ways that you can break them up, whether you have 30, 45, 60, or 90-minute periods at your school. We also know that so many schools already are really doing awesome things with mental health and suicide prevention curricula. So if you don't have room to take your whole current programming out and replace it with this, and you just want to pop in a couple lessons to supplement the great work that you're already doing, that's completely okay too. We believe that every school is unique. The needs of all different schools and different students are unique. And so we want this to be flexible and adaptable. We just want this to be a value to you and your students. So when you're teaching the Aevidum curriculum, you really have 2 options on how you can deliver it. We wanted to make it as easy and simple for teachers to implement. And we also recognize that not everyone is super comfortable talking about mental health and suicide prevention. So to help with that, we have 2 options, 2 ways you can go when you teach us at your school. First, we have a set of lesson plans and slides that you can reference. You can teach this completely on your own. Or the second option is that you can use our modules that we filmed. So they have a teacher facilitator who will prompt the students. I'll show you an example in a little bit, and then they'll tell you to pause, they'll put a question on the screen, and then you can facilitate that discussion with your students, but you don't have to completely independently teach the curriculum. So it's up to you which avenue that you want to take for what feels most comfortable to you. When this program was originally written, it was taught in a school district where a school counselor co-taught with the health teacher. So that's another option too. I'm the school counselor at the high school that I work at, and I teach these lessons. And I really love the opportunity to get to have a mental health dialogue with my students, and then also kind of be able to let them see me as the resource that they could potentially come to should they feel like they might want to discuss the topics further for themselves or for somebody they care about. So I think it can be a great asset to have a school counselor work with a health teacher to deliver at least some of the lessons, or have somebody pop in. But again, this is flexible for you to do what works best for your school. But now I just want to walk you through the different resources and things that are available on the Aevidum website for when you're ready to implement. When you first arrive on the Aevidum curriculum page, it'll look like this. And just welcoming you to the program. And then you can click Let's Go to get right into the modules. But if you go right here to download course materials, you'll first be able to get instructions, which is just some more information about delivering the curriculum. You'll be able to get the full lesson plans for all 5 modules. You'll be able to get the slides that you can download. You can always make a copy of these if you want to change anything. And then something else that's really important that I'll show you later is that every student should be working through either digitally or printed out the Aevidum workbook. So they'll need that to complete the curriculum as well. But you can download all of these things right here. If you click Let's Go, you'll go into these video modules. So let me show you what these look like. I'll just show you a quick sample.
All right, open up your Aevidum workbooks to the Healthy Handful lesson. On the blank area there, take your writing utensil and trace an outline of your hand.
And on the palm of your hand, I want you to write a personal, positive characteristic about your personality.
I don't know what to write.
And what do you mean by a characteristic?
Yeah, can I write about football?
Try to write a trait that has more to do with your personality.
Like, can I write that I'm friendly?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Now, pause the video and take a moment to share your responses in your own classroom.
So you can see that if you choose to use the video modules, you'll have the video teachers who will be able to prompt you and your students through the activities. And then your job as the facilitator or teacher would be to do these parts where we pause. So like she just said, this part, students will be sharing positive characteristics about themselves. So you'll sort of oversee that dialogue or that piece of it, but you don't have to remember every single piece of the program. So it's up to you again if you want to use these video modules or if you'd prefer to just use the slides and operate on your own. So module 1 contains the healthy handful, the physical versus mental health, and the top 5 causes parts of the workbook. And then again, module 2 brings you to a new video, which has the mental health quiz, the signs of depression, and the stressors lesson. Module 3 has positive mental health, circle of trust. And again, there's teachers in all these videos to help guide you and your students. You can also just watch these if you want a little bit more of a preview before you teach them yourselves. Module 4 is what would you do and resources. And lastly, module 5 is our closing activity. So again, that's how you would go ahead and use the video modules. But to help you understand what to expect as you actually teach the curriculum with your students, I think we should look at the student workbook. But before getting into that, I just like to go over what I share with students in the introduction component. So before you begin teaching the curriculum, I think it's important to share 4 different messages with your students. First, they've probably, depending on your school, potentially have never seen the word Aevidum. So if you're in a school where they haven't seen the word Aevidum, or even if you do have an Aevidum club at your school, maybe the message hasn't reached every single student. So it's a good time just to tell students that the word Aevidum was created by other students after they lost a classmate to suicide. It comes from Latin roots. It means I've got your back. And after these students lost their friend, they really wanted to create something to ensure that no one else would feel alone. No one else would feel as hopeless as their friend had. They wanted to really try to prevent future tragedies. And they really wanted people to know that they're cared about and that there are lots of people who have their back. So that's sort of the angle that we're taking throughout this whole curriculum, is that we can be there for each other and we can be there for the people that we care about, and we can make sure that nobody in our school feels like they're alone. The other thing that's important to note is that this program focuses on the ways we can help each other and be there for each other. So while taking the curriculum, it's very possible that students might think of a time or an example where they did not handle things the way that they would have liked to. And it's important to remind them that that's completely okay, that they shouldn't be hard on themselves for doing something that they didn't know how to handle at the time. We're only responsible to act with the knowledge that we have at the time. And I'm sure they were doing what they thought was best. And if they learn a different technique or a different strategy through this curriculum, it's not something to reflect on and feel guilty about, but something to be proud of themselves for being here now and being willing and ready to learn how to have their friends' backs. The third thing I like to do is acknowledge that topics like mental health and suicide are very hard to talk about. So if anyone's having a hard time or wants to discuss anything further, there are supports available in your school. And the more specific you can be with these, the better. So remind them who their school counselors are or how they can get connected with their SAP team, whatever resources you promote at your school. It's very possible that students in the class are struggling themselves or know someone who's struggling with their mental health. Some have even probably lost someone they care about to suicide. So I like to acknowledge that. And I like to tell the students that all of the time and effort and learning that's going to occur in these next few lessons, those are really ways that we can dedicate and remember and honor the people that we know who struggle, or ourselves, or the people that we've lost. And lastly, the fourth point is that part of our Aevidum movement is that we keep student voice central to everything. So all of the educators and all of the students who appear in the video modules are all real students, real teachers. None of us are paid actors, which will be obvious in some of the scenes that you see. And I just like to tell students that because there are a couple times where the acting can be not super professional, and it's okay for them to giggle a little bit at that. But I just like them to know that these are real kids who gave up their time to be in these because they really care about mental health. So, the first activity after you introduce your students to the curriculum is the healthy handful activity. This should take about 10 minutes, and this is really an activity that's meant to sort of set the stage and put the students in the right mindset for the rest of the curriculum. And so, what students are going to do is trace the outline of their hand. Some of them will say, my hand's too big. So, just let them know they can like turn it, they can go over the boxes a little bit, it's fine. But have them trace their hand, and then they're going to write one positive character trait about themselves on the palm of their hand. And so they'll want to write things like, I'm good at football, I make really great TikToks. And so you just want to kind of redirect them to make a statement about their character. And some of them will really struggle with this. They'll ask for examples. The video uses the example of the word friendly. I would just caution you to be careful about giving out too many examples, because they will sometimes just use the examples that you give, because this kind of feels pretty vulnerable for some of them. And so then afterwards, they're going to go around the room and they're going to share their characteristic with everyone else. When I teach this in ninth grade, I don't know how this started, but they got into the habit of high-fiving themselves. So they'll say like, I'm Francesca and I'm friendly. They'll high five their paper and then they'll pass the high five to the next person. And they get really into this, like passing the high five and also making sure that nobody in the classroom gets left out, that the high five reaches everyone. So if that's something that you think your students could add to be more entertained, please feel free to add that, but otherwise they can just read it. And then after everyone has shared, you'll go into the discussion about how you feel when you're focusing on the positive, like your strengths, things that go well in your life. And I try to make the following points during that discussion. First, I try to help them understand that appreciating your gifts is not bragging. A lot of them will say that they feel like they're being arrogant or cocky. And so I try to help them understand there's a balance between being arrogant and also appreciating and admiring the things that you like about yourself. And that appreciating yourself and being grateful for your gifts is actually a really positive and healthy thing. And then I ask the students, do you feel like on a daily basis that you spend more time praising yourself, building yourself up, or tearing yourself down? And most of my students are able to acknowledge that they spend a lot of time criticizing themselves. And so I challenge them, like maybe this is something they could repeat on a daily basis. Like, what is one thing that I did well today? What is one attribute that I showed that I'm really proud of myself for doing today? Just again, to help with their mindset. And then the last thing I like to ask them is how they felt about hearing their peers say what their peers liked about themselves. And most of my students, again, will say that it was really cool to hear so-and-so acknowledge that they think they're funny because I think they're so funny. And so it was cool for me to hear them appreciate that in themselves. So just remind students that, again, no one was thinking that they were being arrogant or braggy. In fact, they really liked hearing each other speak positively about each other. The second activity is this physical versus mental health activity. And this takes about 15 minutes. And for this, I partner my students into groups of 2, but you could also have your students complete this individually. I asked them to take through some time to go through each scenario with their partner and then write down how they think they would what they truly think that they would do and who they would reach out to if they were encountering these situations. And I asked them to make sure it's what they really would do, not what they think I want them to say. And it's okay if in a group of partners, they are going to respond 2 different ways. They don't have to write the same thing. They just have to write how they would respond. So then I bring the students back together and I just say, okay, runny nose and cough, what would you do? And I take a couple answers for each one. And then at the end, I sort of say, okay, what did you guys notice about the differences between the way you responded to the physical health situations and the way you responded to the mental health situations? And so what I tend to see is that in the physical health situations, they really clearly know what to do. They escalate the situation quickly. In the mental health situations, there's a lot of like, maybe I'll sleep it off. I don't think I'll tell anyone. I'll wait and see. And a lot more uncertainty and a lot less action. So when I go into the discussion, these are really the points that I'm trying to make with the students and the points that I'm looking for. So first, this idea of familiarity, that we really like learn from a young age how to react and respond to these physical health issues, but we sort of lack education about what we should do with the mental health issues. We're also really familiar with going to the doctor when we have a cold, but not so much what we should do when we feel really sad for an extended period of time. And because we don't talk about them as much, it's a little bit more unclear what we should do. The second thing I talk about is stigma. So part of the reason they're keeping the mental health things to themselves is because they're not sure if they should tell anyone. They're not sure if they're going to feel embarrassed or shamed or blamed for what they're going through. They know that there's no shame in having a runny nose, so they're really quick to get a tissue. But if they're feeling really sad, they can be worried about how people might perceive them. And so I talk about, like, is that fair? Where does that come from? And then the whole reason that we're doing this today is because we want people to never feel like there's any more shame in feeling sad than there is in a runny nose. Like, it's exactly the same. It's just something that people deal with, and there should be no shame in that. We should be able to get help. The next one is the fact that they're hidden illnesses. So if somebody has, chest pains and coughing up blood, like, the whole class is going to stop if someone's coughing up blood because it's very obvious. But if someone's having serious thoughts of suicide in class, the other students might not even know, the teacher probably wouldn't know. And so it's harder to get help or intervene when something's not as visible and obvious. And the last thing that I like to emphasize is that both are serious, that people can pass from serious thoughts of suicide just like they could if they were having extreme, more physical health symptoms, and that it's not a sign of weakness, and that it's something that we really need to take seriously because it can be fatal. Sometimes when I get to the chest pains and coughing up blood, students will, exclaim or laugh. And I think that that's okay. Like, again, you can just emphasize, like, it's so obvious that you need to go to the hospital or get a doctor or something when that's happening. But serious thoughts of suicide, again, it's not that obvious. So this is just a good dialogue to sort of start talking about these topics. The next activity is the top 5 causes, where students list the top 5 causes of death in American teens in order. And this activity, I usually give students about 20 minutes for. So for this, I put students into small groups of about 3 to 5, and I give them 5 minutes to talk through what they think the top 5 causes of death might be. And then they come back together as a group, and I ask them some of the categories they're thinking of. And so they'll say things like car accidents, overdoses, and then I give them the 5 categories because the things that they're saying are accurate, but that's not how the CDC categorizes them. And I feel like that's not fair for them to know that. So once they've guessed all 5 categories correctly, which are cancer, heart disease, suicide, accidental deaths, and homicide, I give them another 2 minutes, and those are not in the correct order. I give them 2 minutes to put them in the order that they think that they would be. And then I ask each group to report out their guesses to the rest of the class. And after each group goes, I'll say, you have 3 right, but 2 mixed up. You have all 5 in the wrong spot. And then they can try to reevaluate until one group gets them all right. And then I write it all on the board and make sure that they write the actual order down correctly. So the actual order is: number 1 is accidental deaths. Number 2 is suicide. Number 3 is homicide. Number 4 is cancer. And number 5 is heart disease. I tell the students that this data comes from the Center for Disease Control. They track all of this data. And I emphasize that there's a lot of misinformation, particularly about suicide, on the web. And so it's really important that when you're looking up information about statistics or things for help for someone like this, that you're going to reputable websites. Things like the American Association of Suicidology versus nosuicide.com, or the CDC is always the best place to get data. And then I ask students, were they surprised or not surprised by the ranking of these things? I ask them which they think are the most preventable and in which the intervention of a friend can potentially make a difference. So I like to talk about how suicide is preventable, and friends can really make a difference by speaking up and telling an adult when they are concerned. But I also think it's really important that we never send the message that suicide is 100% preventable, because we all know so many situations where families and friends did everything they could, they did everything right, and a tragedy still occurred. So I like to say that if someone's really hurting and we can get them to the help they need, there's so much potential that they could overcome, and that we could get them help. But I don't like to say that it will definitely happen, because there's so many complexities that go into this. Lastly, I like to emphasize that although suicide is a leading cause of death among teens, it should not be considered a common response or a good response to the stressors that we experience in life. The next lesson is the mental health quiz, which takes about 30 minutes to complete. And so for this, students will have some time to complete these questions in a small group, and then they'll play a video that features a bunch of suicide prevention experts, advocates, loss survivors, and they'll extract the correct answers from the video. So I put my students into 6 groups because there's 6 questions, and I give them about 8 minutes to walk through the questions for the mental health quiz. And then I assign each group one question to really focus on getting the right answer to as they watch the video. Then I play the mental health quiz video so the students can hear from the experts. And then I go back and ask each group what they think the correct answer to their assigned question is. Then I'll review the correct answers with all of them to make sure they all have correct answers in their workbooks. And then it's a good opportunity to talk through anything that surprises them, any misconceptions, or anything that they want to discuss further. Next is the stressors lesson, which takes about 15 minutes to complete. For this lesson, you're going to give each student a sticky note, and then you're going to play the stressors video, which is, if you're using the video modules, it just will flow into it in the video module. And if you're using the slides, it's embedded into the slides for you. So students will be holding up different signs with things that they experience in their lives, and the final sign will be blank. And that's the prompt for your students to write what's on their blank page or what's on their sticky note. So they'll go ahead and write anonymously something that they experience stress about, but do let them know that they're going to put this on the board. So they don't want to write something super personal, but it won't have their name on it. If it's something that they are really stressed about, that they would like someone to contact them about, let them know that they don't have to make it anonymous. They can write their name or their initials on the back of the sticky, and that you as the teacher will check them at the end of class. If there's anybody that has something with a name on it, you'll make sure to connect them to someone who can help. We'll give them like a few ideas, like things like homework, and help them understand where those would fall on the can and cannot control. So if somebody's saying they have stress about homework, some students might argue that that's something they can't control, like the teacher assigns the homework, they have no control over that. Other students might say it's something they can completely control because they get to pick what time they start their homework, how they balance their activities, manage their time, things like that. So as a teacher, I would put that somewhere in the middle because I recognize there's aspects that they can and aspects that they can't control. Although some stressors are beyond our control, we can still control how we respond to these things. And sometimes it can be really helpful to recognize the things that are beyond our control so we can kind of let those go. And we also have the opportunity to pick whether we cope with things in a positive or a negative way. And we're not perfect. We all make mistakes, but we do have that power over how we cope and whether or not we reach out for support when we need it. So then I would invite students to come up to the board and put their sticky note where they think it falls on the continuum of things they can control and things they cannot control. And then I like to have them write in their workbook the specific aspects. So say they had homework and they put it right here in the middle. What are the things they can control and what are the things they cannot control? And then I like to have them identify at least one way that they can cope with the stress of whatever they wrote down. The next activity is signs of depression, and this takes about 10 minutes. In order to do this, this has a video that accompanies it. And again, it's part of the module if you're using the module, and if you're using the slides, it's embedded in the slides. So before we watch the video, I ask students to try to familiarize themselves with these symptoms and signs of depression so that they're not just reading them for the first time while they're watching the video, because the video is pretty short and it goes fast. So have them take a minute to familiarize themselves with these. And then I play the video at least twice, and I ask them to watch the video of the student's day and check any of the things that they think the student is displaying. And then I ask the students to share what they've checked. What did they see? What did they notice? So after they watch the video and you dialogue about the different symptoms that were present in Bailey's day, prompt the students to answer the questions at the bottom of this page. Facilitate a discussion for each one. A couple of important things to emphasize with this lesson are that we are just seeing one day in Bailey's life, and this could represent just a bad day or it could be something more, but that major depressive disorder needs symptoms to persist for at least 2 weeks. So a bad day does not necessarily indicate that someone has depression. They might be feeling depressed that day, but that doesn't mean that they have depression. And then another thing that I like to emphasize, that as a student, you should never feel the need to be diagnosing your friends. This This is just a little activity to familiarize themselves with what depression could look like in somebody you care about, but that's not something that you have to worry about. You know whether or not your friend is struggling. You don't need to figure out what mental disorder they could be struggling with. That's something that a professional would do. You just need to notice when something is wrong and then help guide your friend to help or make a referral to an adult who you think can help them. So this is the check-in activity, and you can really place this wherever you want. When I'm teaching this over multiple days, I like to put it toward the end of one of the more charged lessons, just so that I can make sure that they're with me. And really, this question here, do they have a comment or thought about mental health, depression, or Aevidum? Like sometimes a kid will put something that I really wasn't going to talk about, but I'm able to integrate it into the next day's lesson. I also want to make sure that they're thinking about healthy ways that they can deal with what they're struggling with too. So this is just a good check-in activity. You can plop it wherever you need it to be, just to make sure that your students are doing okay and just sort of get a sense of where they're at as they process through this curriculum. The next activity is positive mental health, which takes about 10 minutes. And this is an activity where students are really going to think about what they or people can do to take care of their mental health and what type of activities they can participate in. So I put my students into small groups of about 3 to 5 for this. And then I give them 3 minutes. I set a timer on the board to write down as many positive ways they can maintain their mental health as possible. And to make this lesson a little bit more fun, I make it a contest. And I try to tell them to think of like as many things as they can, but also unique things, like not just, everybody might think of yoga or something like that, but put as many creative things as you think you can think of. And so I go from group to group, and if somebody has the same answer, I just ask them to put a little X next to it so that the team that has the most unique answers, they will win, which really is just a fun thing for, I don't know, my students get competitive, so they tend to engage more when there's like a contest. And so the group with the most unique answers would be the winner. But emphasize to students that they now have this huge list of ways that they can help themselves or try to help a friend if somebody's struggling with their mental health. Mental health issues are treatable, and there are lots of things that we can do to try to maintain our mental health. We all have mental health, whether or not we have mental illness, and we all have times where we don't feel as great as other times. So here's a list of things we can do to try to boost and improve our moods. I also like to remind students that what works for one person may not work for another. So it's important to individually identify which coping techniques work for you. And then I ask them to circle the top 3 strategies that they like, that they think they're most likely to implement in their own lives. The next activity is the circle of trust. This is about a 10-minute activity as well. So I prompt the students to tell them they're going to think about the support network they have in their life, who can they trust and who can they count on. And then I give them about 5 minutes to work on their circle of trust and think about who are people who are in their inner circle. I try to tell them in my class that they have to put at least 3 people and try to make sure at least one is an adult. And then for each of those people, write 3 qualities or 3 things about them that make them trustworthy. Like, how did they earn a spot in your circle? Why are they there? What traits do they possess? And so they need to be specific too. They shouldn't just put like my friend. They should put whatever their friend's name is. No one else is going to see this. And then I have students go around the room, and they don't have to share who it is, but they just have to share one of the reasons that the person was trustworthy. And so I also write all of them on the board. And so at the end, we have this huge list of like things that people can do to be a good support to other people, like what makes people trustworthy, what builds connection. I ask students to look at that list and say, like, are these things that you embody for the people in your life? And are these some things that maybe you want to try to aspire to be? I also tell them they can keep their circle of trust and remember that, because these are the people that they can reach out to if they're ever struggling. Next activity is the what would you do activity. This takes about 20 minutes, and this is always one of my students' favorites. For this, again, this is where you want to remind your students that everybody who appears in these modules are Aevidum students. They are not professional actors, and that many of them donated their time to help produce and star in this because they have lived experience with mental health issues, or they've even lost someone they love to suicide. So what you do for these is you just play the video. So it'll show a scenario. The first scenario is a social media related thing. The second is somebody who's showing more reckless and behaviors that aren't in character with how they typically act. The third scenario is a situation where someone is trying to be supportive of a friend, but the amount of support that this friend requires is then taking a toll on the other friend's mental health too. And then the fourth scenario kind of flips it and says, what if you're not trying to help a friend? What if you're the one who's actually starting to not feel so great and notices that you're struggling? So you'll just show the video. It tells you when to pause, let the students discuss for a few minutes, ask them what they think, like hold a dialogue as a class about what they think they should do. And then Dr. Winterstein, who's a suicide prevention expert, will come on and he will explain what the students could do in that scenario. The next activity is called resources, and this takes about 10 minutes. And this is cool because this contribution actually comes from our little Aevidum students. So that's our elementary Aevidum program. And so for little Aevidum, they wanted to be a part of this curriculum too. So they put together this resource video. So play the video again for the students. And then after that, give them some time to brainstorm concretely where they can get help for other people in school and outside of school. I try to get them to do at least 3 specific in-school supports and 3 specific out-of-school supports. And then this is a great time for you to highlight all of the resources that exist within your school and your own community, and have students write down the resources. And the more specific you can be, the better. And then lastly, we have the closing activity, which takes about 10 minutes as well. If you're using the video module, there's a little bit of an introduction for this one. But if you're just using the slides, again, you're just going to have students trace their hands, and using all of the knowledge and everything that they've learned throughout the whole rest of the curriculum, you're going to ask them for something really specific that they would do to have someone's back. And that's completely individual to them and what they want to write. And you're asking them by completing this to join the Aevidum movement, to pledge to always try to have their friends' backs. And they can share their responses with the class too of what they think that they would do if they knew somebody was struggling. You can also tell the students that Aevidum is a national movement, and that there's tens of thousands of students who have pledged to be there for their friends. And that if they want to learn more, they can follow Aevidum on social media. Or if your school has an Aevidum club, it's a great opportunity for students to get more involved. But really challenge the students for whatever they wrote that they would do, challenge them to live it out and to really try to have someone's back in the week after you guys finish the curriculum. And then lastly, before you end, remind students that there are resources at school if they would like to speak to someone about how they're feeling or express concerns about somebody that they care about. So that is the end of the curriculum. I know it's a lot of lessons, but again, you can make it your own and you can pick and choose what you want to use, or you can use it in its entirety. I'm going to put up a slide in a second that shows how to break it down into the different, whether you have 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute, or 90-minute opportunities to teach. We, our Aevidum team, are always available to answer any questions you have and help guide you through anything where you might get stuck. Our email's below. It's clubs@aevidum.org. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us there. And again, thank you for all of the important work that you're doing. It's really a dream of mine that every single student, every school knows how valued they are and knows how much power and help they can have in being there for the people around them that they care about. And by teaching this in your schools, you're really being an important part of helping that mission come true. So thank you for all you do. And please do not hesitate to reach out with any further questions. Thanks and have a great day.